Okay, let's go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everybody. Hello. Welcome to this meeting about Undesign the Red Line. This meeting is being hosted by the Racial and Social Equity Committee of the ANC 3-4G. I'm Libby Martin, co-chair of RACE, along with my co-chair, Corinthia Simmons. Just a bit of background before we get started about RACE. We're really pleased to have this opportunity for educational outreach. We first formed as a task force in 2020 by the ANC. It was initiated by the ANC. And in 2021, we became a standing committee to identify issues of equity and justice within our community and work together to propose concrete solutions. So one of those efforts, one of those solutions that we are working on is outreach in the form of education in our community. And that brings me to Joy. Joy Bates Boyle, we're very fortunate to have her. She's actually a neighbor across the street from Cal Simone, who's a member of RACE, and he immediately put us in touch. Thank you, Cal. And we have been learning about the exhibit, and Joy is involved in this exhibit. As of early 2023, she was invited to join fellow parishioners at her church, St. Columba's Episcopal, in bringing this whole exhibit to Upper Northwest DC. This group of volunteers invited others from Ward 3 churches and synagogues to form a planning team. So they developed a project plan, they raised funds, they recruited a community advisory group to help shape the local content of this exhibit. And Joy is continuing to volunteer by publicizing this exhibit and doing things like this for us this evening. So it's a wonderful exhibit. We're so pleased to have you talk to us about it. I'll just turn it over to you.
Thank you, Libby. And thank you, Cal. It took a little while, but I appreciate Cal's persistence in getting this on the calendar. It's a great opportunity to share highlights of Undesign the Red Line and our upcoming programs. So I'm going to dive right into it and share some slides with you, and we'll take questions at the end. Let's see. Okay. You're seeing the slides, Libby?
Yes.
Great. Perfect. So Undesign the Red Line is a traveling exhibit that tells the story of federal, state, and local policies that created the practice of redlining. And it also explores other forms of displacement and discrimination. The exhibit then focuses on the residual effects of these policies and on how our communities developed and how racial inequities were baked into our neighborhoods as a result. And beyond explaining redline, each time the exhibit is displayed, it's essentially created anew by the host community and through research into local stories on how our specific neighborhood of Upper Northwest DC, how it's been shaped by the laws and policies dating to the early 20th century. And here's what it looks like in the Cleveland Park Library. And I'm gonna switch now to a video that will give you a feel for what it was like on opening night. And you'll probably see some familiar faces in the video. It's really short. And when Libby and I did a run through earlier, it was a little, it may not have been clear, but I want you to see it. And there are subtitles that you'll be able to read if you can't quite understand what people are saying. So let's give it a go. Let's see.
Joy, hold on. I think we just lost exhibit screen. Okay, there we go.
See, okay, so yeah, well, I wanted to get away from that and show the video. Let's see, let me get back to share screen, and here, try this one. Can you see the video now?
Yes, we can see the work page around it as well. So it's not full screen. There we go. That's full screen.
Hi, I'm Braden Crooks. I'm one of the co-founders of Designing the We, along with April D. Simone, and this is the Undesign the Red Line exhibit. We are so thrilled to have it here in Ward 3 in Northwest DC. This is a place that was not redlined. It was a place where racial exclusion happened that prevented many people of color from moving to Upper Northwest.
I'm so glad that this exhibit is shining a light on the history that has so often been overlooked. I think it's particularly important to bring this exhibit to Northwest DC and Ward 3 because we are a mostly white affluent neighborhood. And we need to understand that that occurred by design, not by accident.
All right, and I'll go back to the slides now.
Great job.
Okay, and so what are we trying, when I say we, I mean fellow volunteers and sponsors of the exhibit, what are we trying to accomplish here? Here's a look at our goals. Let's see. We're trying to provide a transformational educational experience that reframes our understanding of how Ward 3 and adjacent neighborhoods evolve towards exclusion and evolve towards racial exclusivity. And by creating this shared understanding of our history, that DC is part of a larger history nationwide. It wasn't just our neighborhood, it was everywhere where structural racism was built into our systems. And as the name suggests, undesigned, we want to hope that this leads to conversations about how we undo some of these policies and the harmful effects from systemic racism. And given the fact that it's a sensitive issue, it's hard to talk about race, it's hard to talk about injustices of the past and the present. The exhibit is very straightforward and fact-based, but it's also a safe space, if you will, to explore and talk about these issues. And the programs we've created, the tours that we offer and the programs we created also are opportunities for conversation and learning and extending that. And then once we've shared that understanding and we've laid the foundation, creating opportunities to consider what's next. And that hopefully will lead towards action, towards building more equitable communities. The exhibit is at the Cleveland Park Library through July 11th, so just a little over a month away. How did it get here? Designing the We is a firm out of New York City. It's a design firm that focuses on community-driven social and cultural and economic development. And the exhibit has appeared all over the country, from New York to LA, New Orleans, South Bend, Indiana, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, at universities, at the Federal Reserve Building in Atlanta, in public spaces where people can come and learn about the national history of redlining and housing discrimination. And to bring it to Ward 3, as Libby mentioned earlier, St. Columbians, fellow parishioners of mine at my church, saw the exhibit in Columbia, Maryland, at the Howard County Library in the fall of 2020, and they loved it. They thought it was fascinating, and they decided to try to bring it here. They invited me to join that effort, and together we invited other houses of worship to form a planning committee. And those houses of worship are all Upper Northwest. So Addis Israel Congregation, Chevy Chase Presbyterian, St. Columba's, St. Paul's Lutheran Church, Temple Micah, and Temple Sinai. And let me be clear, this is a secular exhibit. It's not faith-based at all. We have very diverse funders and leaders for the project too. It's not just the faith communities, but it is the first time that faith communities have sponsored the exhibit, have organized it in their committee. In other cities, it's been the city government or foundations or nonprofits interested in exploring housing, but this is the first time for faith communities. So that's pretty cool. And we also, but we're not experts on all of this. So our planning committee recruited the community advisory group of historians, housing advocates, developers, realtors, anybody with sort of an understanding of what local stories need to be included in the exhibit to help set our local history within the broader frame of redlining and housing discrimination. And most importantly, on our community advisory group, we have descendants of the Black families who were displaced from Upper Northwest. Now, and once you can come see the exhibit on your own. It's designed to be self-guided. You can drop in on a public tour on Thursdays and Sundays at 1:30. If you have a group of people that's 5 people or more, you can schedule a special group tour. So think your book club, your colleagues at work, your family and friends, or maybe RACE would like to schedule, or ANC members would like to get together and come and see the exhibit as a group. And then of course you're in the library and there's plenty of room to sit and chat about it afterwards, or go across the street and grab a beer and continue the conversation. And the exhibit is interactive. As you see on the right-hand side of this slide, somebody who visited shared their story about living in the original Levittown and not realizing until they were in their teens that it was built to intentionally be exclude Black families. And so what happens when you get to the exhibit? I'm going to walk you through the 5 sections and just give you a very top line introduction to each of them. And it is, I should tell you, it's quite dense. Even though it's not very big, it's quite dense, and you might want to visit more than once to take it in, because there's quite a lot to experience. But here on the first section, we introduce the history of redlining dating to the 1930s, around the time that of the Depression and later when the New Deal was being launched. And redlining essentially brought Jim Crow into our housing structures and the systems of home ownership. You'll see there the quintessential redlining map. This is of the Bronx, and it explains what the different colors mean. And to the left of that map, there is what's called an area description form, where surveyors will go into neighborhoods and describe them. What's the topography like? But most importantly, what's the color of the skin of the people who live there? And explicitly identifying Black people and Black communities on these forms, and that determined how much investment would go into those communities. And to the right of that map, there is data about the racial wealth gap that continues to this day. On the second section, you'll see that the map on the right is a map of DC. And in DC proper, there was no redlining per se, like the map of Baltimore next to it. It's got the different colors, and the red sections were the undesirable places where investment was not encouraged. But DC had a similar system. The darker shaded areas were mostly white, affluent communities. And I don't know, it's probably hard to tell, but that's west of Rock Creek Park, which comes as no surprise. And this is the first time that visitors are invited to interact with the exhibit. You can take a push pin and place where you used to live and where you do live. And it's really cool to see who lived where. And same with Baltimore. There's a handful of pins on the Baltimore map as well of people that lived there and now live here, or vice versa. And it gets people thinking about, where do I live and why, right? It's sort of setting the stage for exploring the rest of the exhibit. And to the left of those maps are images and examples and excerpts from underwriting manuals that explicitly detail. And then these even there were 239 redlining maps. And even if there wasn't a redlining map for your community, these underwriting manuals went everywhere. And the surveyors and the insurance and the lenders, et cetera, were going by this manual of keeping whites and Blacks in separate neighborhoods. And there's also a quote from the National Association of Real Estate Brokers that describes why it is in Black people's best interest to keep them out of white neighborhoods. Really shocking and disturbing to even think about it. The next section is the centerpiece of the exhibit, and it is intentionally meant to look overwhelming. what it's a timeline, and what you have on the top, the white section going across the top is the timeline of policies from the top down being enacted mostly by white males in power, that reinforced housing segregation and discrimination and displacement. The bottom line is a little bit more optimistic. It shows the pushback and the response to those policies. And in the middle, you see these tags, these red and white tags, and that is where, again, visitors are invited to interact with the exhibit and to write their experiences or reactions to what they're learning on those tags and leave them behind. So the top timeline starts with slavery, goes through Reconstruction to Jim Crow, the Great Migration, the New Deal and redlining, urban decay, white flight, urban renewal and gentrification. Again, more policies reinforcing segregation, the broken windows policies, the drug bill, and how some of these laws led to mass incarceration. But the bottom timeline starts with abolition and desegregation, the civil rights movement, other movements that seek to empower disenfranchised people, like in Black Lives Matter. And as you may see, there's little boxes, they're called pop-outs, and those are local stories here in DC that are placed to show what was kind of happening in that part of the timeline, what was happening here in our neighborhood, like the displacement at Reno City, or the Chain Bridge School over in Palisades when it was closed. It was a Black school. And there's also positive stories, like the establishment of UDC in Van Ness. And these are the stories that were curated by and informed by our conversations with our community advisory group, people who really helped us choose what stories to highlight. And when you move forward to section 4, there's more local stories from Washington, DC, like our own Broad Branch, Black Broad Branch, and the Macedonia Church and the cemetery in Bethesda that the cemetery was paved over. So some disappointing stories on the left, Reno City, but on the right, stories showing progress, like the Episcopal Diocese commitment to reparations. And you finally end on a positive note with, all right, now that we've absorbed all of this, how can we undesign redlining? And the first step is to reframe, which is what we're doing with the exhibit, changing the narrative and getting to a place where we understand that the systems that were created were intentional and designed to be exclusive. The second step is to redesign those systems. And there's example, and it kind of talks about how we could do that, and there's an example of a community that was redesigning its systems. And then finally, reinvesting in communities that have been underinvested. And again, people are invited to leave their thoughts and provide feedback. So this is where we open up to conversation about, okay, what next? What are we going to do next? And our programs, we've planned 15 programs that ask the same question, that we're learning about our history, but also having an opportunity to explore options for creating a more equitable society. And we've had 2 with high schoolers. We are having 2 interfaith discussions. We're showing a couple of films followed by discussion. We had an art exhibit. We're having 2 programs with the National Association of Realtors and their involvement in discrimination. There was a book talk, there was a policy talk. There's a handful of programs left. And so I'm just going to talk very quickly about each of those. And I would encourage you to come because it really extends your understanding and, you know, with having real people to talk to and not just walking through the exhibit and reading. So tonight, if you're not doing anything, I encourage you to come down and join us at the Cleveland Park Library, where we'll have, it's called Course Correction. Now, for those of you who might have gone to a program earlier, a month or so ago with the National Fair Housing Alliance, this program is different in that it's going to delve more deeply into the National Association of Realtors history and complicity in exclusion and segregation and discrimination, and what they've done to change course. Thus the name of the program, Course Correction, going from an opponent of fair housing to an ardent advocate. And the two presenters will be Colette Massagale and Lori Brenner that you see there. So that's tonight, Cleveland Park Library. I'd love to see you there if you want to join. But also, particularly for our area in Chevy Chase, DC, the Black Broad Branch Project, and through Historic Chevy Chase and others, you've probably heard this story, but it's worth hearing it again. Corey Shaw and Mariana Barros Titus, who were UDC students who researched the Black Broad Branch Project and got the oral histories from Jocelyn Julian and other descendants, will talk about their work and about the history of Lafayette Park and the families who lived there and were, through eminent domain, were displaced. Jocelyn and other descendants from the families will also speak that night. And then, of course, there'll be plenty of time for Q&A. Then the week after that, on a Tuesday night, the Washington Interfaith Network, in case you don't know, it's a citywide, multiracial, multi-faith. It represents 45 faith and other institutions from all 8 wards of the district, and they are organizing to give voice to the underrepresented. They will talk about how racial and economic displacement is shaping the Ward 3 that we live in, and how it might look if we were to undo some of those policies and examine our history and make changes towards a more diverse community. And then our last scheduled program, we are working on a couple more, so stay tuned, there might be more. But our last program at the moment is July 2nd, and some of you may know of Sarah Schoenfeld. She led a public history project called Mapping Segregation in DC. And she's going to talk about that project and what they've learned since 2014 to document the racially restricted housing, the covenants, and other historic mechanisms of segregation and racialized displacement. So those are our programs. All of these happen to be at the Cleveland Park Library. So I encourage you to come down, and you can visit our website is undesigneddc.org for more information about those programs. You can sign up to receive updates about the program. So as new ones come online, I'd love to shoot you an email and let you know where and when and what the topics will be. Or you can email me at undesigneddc@gmail.com. Thank you again for this terrific opportunity and your interest, and I would love to take your questions and comments.
I want to first just say thank you so much to Joy, because this is a great overview that also dives into the really important major points and details of what's coming up. And in particular, a lot of issues that we're talking about in our very own neighborhood of Chevy Chase. And I know our neighborhood is so interested in history. So I hope that everybody will be interested in learning about this important history.
I want to confirm the suggestion you made, Joy, about coming maybe for a tour and then going back and spending time on your own. I'm with Northwest Neighbors Village. I'm on the board of Northwest Neighbors Village. I know you've been in touch with Stephanie. We had a group of about 12 who did a tour, and then we had a discussion lunch afterwards. And it was our diversity and inclusion working group. And now we're having another one next Thursday, opening to the community, and another lunch discussion afterwards. But I feel myself the need to go back by myself, separate from the tour, because there's so much there. It is very dense, and you know, there's a personal thing about finding the part of it that's most important to me. Anyway, I've learned so much, and I hope to share it with others too.
Perfect.
I also love the way it intersects with education at the high schools, that you had, I believe, kids from Jackson Reed that were part of the program. It's so important that there's that intersection, right, between learning history and associating it really with what's going on at school.
Yeah, we wanted to tap into the energy among students around these issues. And we're delighted that some Jackson Reed students came and presented about their work and their research into Reno City. And later, students from a wide swath of high schools came for a facilitated discussion around where they live and why, and their reactions to the exhibit as well. I think that we've had more than 20 groups come through, or they're scheduled to come through. And there's a full 6 weeks left, so we'd love to have more.
I think Brian had his hand up.
I did, and thank you, Libby. Joy, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for all your effort, and thank you for this traveling exhibit as well. I feel like we also need to reach out to our local distinctive, distinguished members of our community who are Black members of our community. And one of the things I'll say is, I live very close to Chatsworth, which is in Ward 4, but as am I, because I'm served by the community center from Ward 4. But we're close to many distinguished members of our Black community, and I just want to point that out. And I hope, there are 2 past presidents of the DC Chamber of Commerce who live a block from me that I feel like you guys ought to reach out to and get to know. It's like, so I just wonder if we've reached out to them effectively. And certainly there are many distinguished members of our community that are also in AU Park and Tenleytown. And I'm hoping that to St. Columbo, I've attended services at St. Columbo more than once. And it seems to me, there are many distinguished members of our community that are Black that attend St. Columbo that you could reach out to as well and be sure that we include. I wonder how we've done that.
Well, Brian, I would love to hear from all of you. Any suggestions for who we should be inviting and making sure that they know about it. And I have no shame. I will sign them up for our weekly reminders about programs. And if they want to unsubscribe, they can, but to invite them formally. And so
I find it's a little ironic, actually, the Julian Bond, who was president of the NAACP for 20 years, lived in Ward 3. And, it's kind of, I think we need to recognize that we have been the beneficiaries of being close neighbors with distinguished members of the Black community for many, many years, and just be sure they're included.
Well, if you could share some names and email addresses, or
I'd be happy to. Actually, I know Michelle Montiel, who's Richard Montiel's spouse, Corinthia, we wanted to reach out to you, maybe just have coffee and get involved in terms of Richard was past president of the DC Chamber of Commerce as well. And, it's in terms of talking about where we are at this moment, I think it's just important to be sure we reach out to all members of our community in Ward 3.
I agree.
It's good to hear, Brian. If you want to include RACE in the email, we'd be happy to take those names as well.
And so two other requests. If you think of people and you would like me to reach out to them and just want to make sure you know about this exhibit, I'd be delighted to do that. We got a nice story in City Paper and on WAMU last week. Still trying to get the local TV stations interested and the Post interested. If you have ideas or connections for how we might attract some coverage from those outlets, I'd love to hear about it. And also, we, meaning the volunteers and the sponsors, we retain we retain all of the content that's in the exhibit, but the physical content, we retain those pop-outs that I pointed out on the timeline that have the local stories, and we retain all of Section 4. So if you're in your office building, or I'm thinking the Chevy Chase Community Center or library, or if you have ideas for where that section 4 and our local stories could appear, you know, after the exhibit comes down, we'd love to pack it up and set it up and pass it on and keep that, at least that section of the exhibit going.
The
And
I'm
idea
so
of
glad you
sharing
explained that
with
too,
this.
Joy.
Go ahead,
Because,
Cal.
when I looked at the Barnard Columbia version of this traveling exhibit, obviously it focused on Columbia as the second largest landholder in New York City and a history of land acquisition. And I know in DC, of course, George Washington University acquired all of Foggy Bottom in the 1920s and moved their campus there from near Howard. And I wonder, do you think there's a sense that this whole exhibit was begun in part uh, to kind of look at questions that might talk about liability for historical development on the part of large developers? What do you think was the inception for it in Dallas originally, in terms of the original inception?
oh, I think,
Maybe
well,
social justice?
I do not know, but I could find out what the original thinking was, but the very first exhibit was in the Bronx.
Well, I see the first one I have, I can send you the link to the Dallas exhibition. Because they say they were the first in the country of the traveling exhibit.
Oh, really? Okay. All right, I'll look at that. It was my understanding that it was the Bronx, but,
Yeah, I remember speaking with the organizer that was in your video who brought it from New York.
maybe Dallas was the first place outside of New York.
I think it was the first place nationally. Actually, I'll send you the link.
Okay,
I would hope that it was the initial impetus for this exhibit was social justice. I had a question. Do we have an idea of what the turnout so far has been from Chevy Chase residents? Is there,
you know, I think we are capturing, when people come to programs, we're capturing their name, email, and zip code. When they are on an organized tour, I'm not sure if we know where they live in the city or in the area. We had a survey, you know, where you could take a screenshot and fill out a survey, and nobody was doing it. We really wanted to capture and understand where, you know, the zip codes that people who were visiting the exhibit. The library, so we don't have that, unfortunately. We will know after the exhibit is over, because the library keeps track of how many people come through its doors every day. And so they will see how many more people visited the library April to July, how many people over the previous months or the previous year. And so we'll have a sense of roughly how many people came to see the exhibit, not necessarily how many unique visitors, but total numbers of visitors. We'll have that. But so if you all have ideas, so the exhibit closes at the library on July 12th. That's not to say that the entire thing couldn't be picked up and moved to another location, but we would need to put you in touch with Braden Crooks, who is the founder of Designing the We and created the exhibit. And he would tell you how much that would cost and what it would entail, but we would love to see it continue on. And right now we also are in the process of thinking about how to archive this. Do we with UDC or AU or the library to capture the content, to make it available to educators and other people who want to explore this research and topic later. So we welcome input and ideas about how to do that efficiently and in a way that could be useful to lots of people.
it would be nice if the materials could be available in several places simultaneously. Like, so the purpose of archiving, but certainly seems like it would be nice if it could be available in a community center somewhere in Northwest,
Like Tenleytown, maybe?
like Chevy Chase.
Maybe Chevy Chase.
How
But
about
maybe
the
Tenleytown first.
So
But-
Joy, Joy, I had a question. So in the exhibit, it has, the interactive piece where you talk about where it's asking for suggestions. What's gonna happen with those parts? You know, is it gonna go back to the organizer? Because I think this is really great. But then, like what can we do next? Like you talked about, it asked about how to reframe it. I just, especially for RASE, what can we do to, continue the discussion and break down, that design. And then also it has me thinking about, some people may say, well, now anybody can buy a house anywhere they want to. So, do we still have redlining? Because if you want to buy a house somewhere that's been exclusive, you can still do those. So that still had, that's all is going through my mind too. So what next? What can we do, to continue to reframe and break down that design?
So that's a two-part question, so two-part answer. I would say that for those tags, we're going to collect those and record them and scan them and digitize, make sure that we hang on to them and share them with organizations like RACE or the city's social equity office, or others who, maybe we'll issue a report, maybe we'll capture sort of the learnings and the takeaways from that. That hasn't been decided, but they will definitely be preserved and shared as requested. And with groups like Washington Interfaith Network, would probably want to see what people were saying and maybe incorporate some of that thinking in their projects and their outreach. The second part of your question, I think, was about how, well, redlining is illegal now, which is true, but racism and discrimination still exists in home buying. And in fact, in Jacksonville, a bank was accused of and sued for discriminating loans against Latino and Black people who wanted to buy houses. And so it happened just last year, even though it's illegal. So I think, and the racial wealth gap is still with us as a result of Black people being unable to buy homes and build that equity and pass on that wealth, generational wealth, to their children and descendants and grandchildren and so forth. So, yeah, that's what I would say to people who say you can live anywhere you want, but it's gotten better. But I think understanding the history and how it has impacted us today, even though a lot of laws have been passed and we still have a ways to go.
Thank you, Joy. So I just want to plug out for anyone that's watching this recording and go to the exhibit. Please provide any suggestions, use those tags, answer the questions that the exhibit has. That'd be great to have those responses. I know it's 5:41. Are there any other questions or comments from anyone as we wrap up, before we wrap up?
I can stay a little longer if need be.
I had just a quick question. Joy, how long was that video clip?
I think it was about a minute and a half, minute 25, something.
Okay, I'm just wondering if it might be available to share with the ANC at their next meeting, since none of the commissioners seem to have time to join us today.
Could you all hear it okay? Was it better?
Yes, I thought it was fine, especially with the subtitles. We pointed out in the beginning that it was a little garbled, but that people could focus on the subtitles.
The audio was garbled.
Huh. Yeah, I will, so thank you. Sorry about that. I know how to operate Zoom, but obviously not show videos on Zoom. I'll work on that for the next one. But I'd be happy to share. So Ron, I'd be happy to share if you all could share the video with the ANC members, or I could. I'll shoot it to Libby and Cal and Carentha, and you all can decide.
There's
Cool,
an
thank
ANC
you.
meeting on Monday, I believe, and I know the RACE has a spot on the agenda asked fairly early on, and we could certainly offer to play that video at that moment. And just summarize that we've held this event and that the video will be available on the ANC's website, as well as any other places that you recommend.
Yeah, it's on the Undesigned website too.
Okay,
I'll share that with you.
super. Can I ask, do you know of where the exhibit goes next? Because it does appear in different locations, right?
I don't. I could, yeah, and designing the WE's website isn't great about showing where it's going next. They have a wealth of information about where it's been and different activities there, but no. So what happens is section 1 stays the same, section 5 stays the same. We keep section 4. And we keep the pop outs on the timeline of section 3. But he will take sections 1, 2, 3, and 5. But leave the DC map with us, and so that will be picked up by this guy who lives in Ohio. And he kind of covers the mid-Atlantic and, Ohio, Illinois area. And he'll take it to the next city, and the section 4 would come separate. I don't know. So it's really quite something.
Yeah. All right. Anybody have other questions or comments?
Thank you so much for organizing this. and-
Yeah.
Yes.
It was
Yeah,
excellent.
I just want to say thank you. I'm not native to Washington, DC, but my child is, and this is, helpful to kind of give him some background as he gets older, about to where he was born. So it's very informative for me, especially learning about Black Broad Branch and just other areas, that I don't know because I'm not originally from here. So
Terrific. How old is he?
5.
Oh, okay. Might be a little young.
He
but
came to the exhibit with me, even though he doesn't know what it's about, but
colorful and vivid for sure.
Yeah.
So we're recommending middle school and older. They're are probably a good age to start absorbing.
The actual, I can't remember the gentleman's name, who is one of the people at, I guess, St. Columbus, who is willing to organize the private tours.
Mhm.
He said they could even scale it appropriately to elementary kids. I don't know if that means, doing a story time circle while parents visit or something, but I thought that was really nice that he offered.
I had not heard that. That's Bill Jensen. Yeah, that's a terrific idea.
Joy, I did share the link to the Dallas City Hall Equity Division Undesign the Red Line, but it may be Undesign the Red Line preceded the Design the We format, but that's where that is. So I sent that link to Corinthia and to Libby,
Okay.
but happy to send it to you as well if you like. I think for me, what drew me to this neighborhood was the diversity. And I know I attended my high school son's attendance at the award ceremony at Jackson Reed last night for all the graduating seniors. Remarkably diverse high school that we've got in the center of our mix. And you hope that none of the development that's contemplated at Tenleytown is going to impact that diversity unfavorably. I mean, it's wonderful what we actually have in this community. So, when you think about 8 floors on top of the Whole Foods, that really has, I think the whole Wisconsin Avenue development framework is a big question mark about diversity. But, we have our arms open for refugees from all over the world,
I think
potentially,
that's why
including Gaza.
yeah. On the contrary, I hope that that the development will increase the diversity.
I think that's exactly the question. How do we ensure that happens, that it increases the diversity?
It's going to be with a good focus on affordable housing, hopefully. and things like
And so
this, outreach.
it's
like
it's going to
this.
be in the hands of realtors, mortgage brokers, and cooperatives, right? I mean, that's what New York has is cooperative housing. When you think about co-ops on Fifth Avenue, that's what we need, more co-ops. I think if we're going to go up 12 floors in Tenleytown. That's my view.
Anybody else? Okay, I guess we'll call the meeting to a close, and thank you again, Joy. We'll be in touch. Good night, everybody.
Night.
Right.